It's Fill Your Plate Now, where every bite brings you closer to the farm gate and further from what's unhealthy. Now here's your hosts, Julie and Tammy, helping you live well by filling your plate well.
Well, crop protection and health, two very important topics when it comes to agriculture.
Absolutely. And I am really excited because I get to interview you today. And I know you are the communicator extraordinaire, but I don't often peruse through your bio. And so I got to do that. And that was great because it reminded me of all the experience you've had. I mean, you're the Strategic Communications Director for Arizona Farm Bureau. You oversee the Farm Bureau's communications, which is publications and social media, public relations, marketing, all of those things. And then your background, you have a degree in journalism from ASU and
Go Devils.
and an in addition to that, a management certificate in supply chain management from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And in the 90s, you served as the media liaison for the National Cotton Council Women's Leadership Committee, and you were recognized by the University of Arizona as the Communicator of the Year. You're an Arizona native, and what makes you an expert on talking about crop protection is that you grew up on a cotton and alfalfa farm in Pinal County with three brothers, and you were in the production agriculture business with your parents until 2005.
Yes.
And you also have a book, and I had forgotten that, Fresh Air, which talks about life growing up in southern Arizona in a rural environment.
And you can purchase it on Amazon.com.
Hey, we let everybody plug their books, so
Yeah.
you should too. But all of this I think it gives you that communication side as well as the farm side, as we call you the farmin' darlin'. And, especially with cotton and alfalfa, you have had a lot of experience with, crop protection and the kind of things you need to do.
Right.
But, why don't we start out for our listeners? How did the use of pesticides first originate for crop protection?
Well, believe it or not, it's been around for a long time. If you do the research, the history on it, and so Tammy, I do have my notes that
Uh-huh.
because even though our family farmed, we haven't farmed since 2005, and a lot of things have occurred since then. But historically, farmers in ancient days used crop protection, or as we often speak of it, pesticides, as far back as 2,500 years ago or 2,500 BC. So it's the effort to try to protect our crops against pests that can be so destructive
Mhm.
has been going on for a long time. And these were archaeological discoveries by archaeologists. So crop protection and the effort to protect our crops has been going on for quite some time, which I thought was fascinating because, we don't think about it, that it's gone back that far. It just makes you realize how important it is to our farmers, whether it was, and as we've gone along in history, we've advanced this, but 2,500 BC is a long time ago.
That is a long time ago. And is there a specific, probably back that far, it would be difficult to say, but a specific incident that originated the use of pesticides, or with just getting rid of pests
Right.
in
And
general?
I think and it might have even been further back than that, but of course that's a dated time frame with our archaeologists. But, you know, we've always battled the bugs, as I like to call it, and considering how important it is to protect the crops, because if you have what they call an infestation with massive destruction on crops, and they tried everything, all sorts of variety of a lot of your natural things that you would find in nature to do it. So um, it's just one of those things that was critical for anybody that's in the farming community way back in ancient days.
And I imagine there's quite a bit of science behind it too.
Right.
And over the years, as science has evolved, how has the use of pesticides evolved?
Well, the more we discover and the more we research, the better we can. And of course, most of these changes, these very effective changes, have really only taken place in the last 30 to 40 years.
Mhm.
But the biggest reason, and the World Health Organization points this out, an organization you certainly can appreciate as a nutritionist, they estimate that anywhere from 25 to 30% of crop growth can be destroyed by pests alone. So
Wow.
as the science has increased and improved, so has our crop protection tools in our so-called toolbox to try to protect our crops.
Wow. And I know, pesticides are used on a variety of products, not only the non-edible things like cotton, but also on edible foods. And I know
Right.
most consumers always, hear that isolated story about
Right.
how bad this pesticide is. But tell us and tell all our listeners, are pesticides safe?
They are safe. They're very safe, and they're factored in for human health as well. As an example today, and these are regulated by the EPA, USDA, FDA, Food and Drug Administration. They have what they call re-entry constraints, and it depends on the pesticide, or what I prefer to call it is crop protection. It can be anywhere as short as 4 hours to as long as a 24 to 48-hour period. And one of the other rules that they've employed across the board in farming, for example, is a lot of times these crop protection tools are applied at night. And you might think,
Hmm.
well, why under the cover of darkness? Well, the point is that most of our farm workers and our farmers are not in the fields during the night.
Uh,
So it's one of the most effective ways to make application.
mhm.
The other thing with night applications is our climate, the air, it's a lot calmer. And so this avoids drift and stuff like that. And plus, all of our beneficials like bees,
Mhm.
butterflies, ladybugs, especially bees, they go home at night just like you and I do to rest.
Uh-huh.
So they're not going to be in the fields.
Oh, that's
And that's,
important.
yes, it's so everything is done today factoring in human health and the protection for the crop. Again, if we don't apply these crop protection methods, we're going to have anywhere from 35 to 40%, as I said earlier, destruction in our crops. And we really can't afford to do that if we're feeding the world, feeding ourselves, feeding our state here in Arizona, and also feeding the world. So all of these efforts are designed and employed to protect not only you and I,
Mhm.
if we happen to be farm workers going into the field, but also to protect the crops. That's why we call them crop protection methods. And this is both for organic and conventional farming. There's applications on organics. And so it's very critical that we do things that will protect, regardless of how we're growing that crop and how we're utilizing all those tools. It's critical that we protect human health, and it's critical that we also protect what we like to call the beneficials, like the butterflies, like the bees,
Oh, sure.
and like
Yeah.
the ladybugs.
I remember there was a year when there was a problem with the bees. The bees had all died, and it was a major issue with
Right, and it had nothing to
pollinating.
do with crop protection, by the way.
Mhm.
There was, and actually, and I don't know all the details to that, but it's like, um, this bee mite is what I think they called it, was killing the
Mhm.
bees.
Mhm.
But there's been a resurgence now in the bee population, so that is not the threat that it used to be. And they had to use crop protections and some other tools to make sure that they protected the bees.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got a rogue question.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm gonna throw it at you.
Okay.
But while we were talking, I was just wondering, I remember one of our guests prior to this had mentioned something about we don't always know the steps that are put in place with imported products.
Right.
Are our standards enforced upon those that are importing, or do we just not know?
Ours far exceed what other countries do. And we're trying to influence other countries to have some of the same levels of protection, again, for our farm workers, for
Mhm.
their health, for the farmers, because they go into the fields all the time as well. We're trying to influence the world to set the same standards that we've set
Mhm.
when it comes to our crop protection. One way I speak to this, as much as I know, and I only know, a certain degree compared to some of our farmers that have to deal with this on a daily basis. I feel completely comfortable knowing the safety and efficacy that's going into growing our crops. the biggest point and the biggest takeaway is if we don't have crop protection, we will really risk the level of production that we produce here in America, and that means less food for a growing population.
And I would imagine it would mean higher prices eventually too.
It would. And it's also one of the reasons why we can see what's going on. Our farmers love to talk to the public to tell them about it and recognize how vital these tools are in our protective, so-called, so to speak, toolbox. And that's what makes it so important.
That's great. And every once in a while, we know the media sometimes can blow things out of proportion, but you do hear about some kind of a problem with pesticides and foods. And are those generally foods that have been imported, or are they blowing the predicament out of proportion, or how do those kinds of incidents originate?
Well, sometimes it is because of the imported food, and sometimes it's a degree of pulling things out of context. There was an article not too long ago that said under the cover of darkness. That's why I always like to tell people there's a reason why we apply crop protection methods at night. Again, the air is calmer, the workers are out of the field. We want to protect our beneficials. So a lot of times it's either pulled out of context or they don't understand the whole scope of everything that goes into protecting our crops.
Okay.
And sometimes it's, to your point, the same levels of efficacy in protecting our crops here in the United States, they're not employed as effectively from other countries. And it's one of the reasons why we're so productive, because we are protecting our crops using the tools at hand and reviewed and moderated by the EPA, the FDA, and the USDA. So that is part of what goes on. But really today, when you see how efficient our farmers are at using these tools, there is no risk to the crops. There's no risk to the farm workers.
That's good to hear. And I know you've talked about all these protective mechanisms, but walk us through, like, from planting to harvesting, some of the safety precautions that are put in place.
Well, a few of the things that I've already said, they're not going to even apply some of these crop protection tools unless there's an infestation. And I'll give you a walkthrough. And most of the time, obviously, that's not going to occur until the crop starts emerging from the soil, or if they've planted not the seedlings in a greenhouse. The bugs don't have anything to eat when it's planted in the soil, but once they start growing, bugs love our wonderful crops as much as we do. And so they have these crop protection advisors that go into the fields, and they literally do it with a net, and you'll see them kind of swinging that net side to side as the crops are maybe knee high. It depends. And if there's not much of an infestation from pests, then they'll say, we don't need to do anything. Most of the time, when something has to be applied, when the crop protection has to be applied, it's when they say, oh my gosh, per acre or per square foot that they're trying to measure, you're dealing with an infestation, so we're going to have to apply some kind of crop protection. So whatever that might be, whether they're always going to apply it at night while the farm workers are out of the field. And then if it's a 4-hour reentry rule, then they can't go in the field for another 4 hours. Now, again, if they do it early at night, that's not going to be a problem because we know nighttime lasts a long time. If it's a 24 or 48 hour, then that field can't be touched or re-entered until that expansion period or that 24 to 48 hour period has occurred. So those are some of the things they do. We really have some fascinating commitments by our crop production advisors or protection advisors in terms of how thoroughly and how efficient and how effectively they do it. And a lot of times they'll say, you know what, you don't have an infestation, you don't need any crop protection requirements for your field. And they're checking that field regularly up until harvest.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, once you harvest, then that threat of the pest isn't going to obviously be as scary or detrimental or something that you have to deal with. Another thing that I like to highlight that most people don't know with all of these crop production tools,
Mm-hmm.
they go through 12 years of regulation under the EPA and FDA. And they look at third-party testers in terms of what this new crop protection might require. Millions of dollars, something like $280 million for just that one new tool that possibly could be in our arsenal for the future. And even then, the EPA, USDA, FDA has all authority to reject it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to look for the efficacy and the protection in terms of human health. They're also looking at how effective it is for killing that pest that's destroying the crops.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things that go into that, and it doesn't happen overnight. And for a company to bring a new tool to bear on agriculture so that we can utilize it, it's a long-term effort, and it's a very safe and careful effort to bring that right tool to it. And again, even then, there are times when they say, well, no, we don't want it. So it can be,
Huh.
you know, the company basically is told that they can't utilize it because we recognize that if we don't protect human health and also the crops, then it's a no-go. And that's one of the important factors in all of this. And the companies are held to a very high standard, and we're constantly looking for those areas where we can improve. The other thing, and you may recall this, John Boltz spoke to this point when we were asking him about the thin green line,
Mhm.
and there's that, and this really is representative of that, what we're talking about today, the crop protection. He said today they work with what they call soft pesticides or soft crop protection tools, which means that that designated product is only going to target one specific bug. It doesn't harm beneficials.
Mhm.
Butterflies can still fly over it, and ladybugs as well, and the bees when they're coming into the fields too. So today's crop protection methods
Mhm.
are quote unquote very soft, very delicate, and only targeting that pest that we're trying to destroy because that pest is destroying the crop.
And I would guess there's different pests in different parts of the country, so they use different types of crop
Right,
protection.
exactly. And what they are and how many, it's endless. We actually should bring on the show one of our crop protection advisors because he or she can really drill down on some of the different products that are available and certainly some of the pests that we're battling. I always like to tell people, cotton is a fruit because the seed is inside the boll, and all fruits have the seeds inside them. Well, there's a variety of pests that love cotton as much as you and I do when we love our 100% cotton blouses or pants. But because of the fact that it's a fruit and we love it as much as the pests, there's a constant effort to make sure that the things that we're making application of for our cotton, that we can find those products that will battle the bugs. Last time I heard something like 47 to 57 different varieties of pests attack our cotton
Wow.
plants.
Wow.
And most of that is simply because it's a fruit. And you know how much you and I love fruit. So that's one of the big issues that we look at today. Some crops are going to invite the battle of the bugs more than others. And it's one of the reasons why they're constantly testing and trying to make improvements on those crop protections that we use today in agriculture. The advances we've made, I told you historically, archaeologists 2500 BC were discovering that our farmers were using some type of crop protection. But you fast forward to modern days, the advances that we've made on protecting our crops are amazing. And a lot of those things don't require some of the quote unquote traditional crop protections. A lot of our efforts are very mechanical. For instance, a weed is a pest. We don't think of it as a pest.
I think of it as a pest.
Yes. But if I'm a small farmer, if I'm a small organic farmer, I can basically use a hoe to get rid of that weed. And so mechanically, there's a bunch of methods that we can use
Oh,
that have nothing to do with chemical composition. And whether it's organic or conventional, we're using chemical composition to fight the bugs that want the crop that you and I want.
I always learn stuff from you. I did not realize cotton was a fruit.
Yes.
I have this vision of someone eating cotton. Maybe that's where
It's a
mouth came
a-
from.
Or, yeah,
Yeah.
or a bug. Exactly.
Oh,
Or a bug. You can
yeah.
certainly know that a bug's going to be attacking
It's
it
a
because
fruit
they love
to
it.
the bug.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's amazing. And you mentioned organic briefly, but let's talk a little bit. How do our organic crops differ from traditional crops in terms of the crop protection?
Well, they're in some ways, unless you are a crop protection advisor, you might not even notice the differences because organics is a method of farming, just like conventional is a method of farming.
Mhm.
So a lot of the efforts that we do to protect that crop is the same thing for both sides. What organics has made exclusionary efforts to is to apply what they call natural crop protection or pesticides. But natural, I always say snake venom is natural, but certain snake venoms will kill you.
Mhm.
Even though they quote unquote say it's natural, it's still a chemical composition. You and I are made up of chemicals. So everything in life is a chemical composition. It just may be quote unquote natural. And they like to make that distinction. I will tell you that some of my small organic farmers that I've talked to, they've been able to avoid using any type of pest control,
Oh,
but it's usually the smaller farmers, and they do things like plant, I think it's lavender, and there's some other bushes where they can draw the pests away from the main crop. And then they also factor, and this is one of the reasons why organics has a tendency to be a little bit more expensive, they also factor in their production per acre or whatever it is may not be as great as with conventional because they've just committed themselves to, okay, there's going to be a degree of loss to pests.
Mhm.
And so they haven't applied it. But now, if you're a larger organic farm, you're going to have to apply some type of pest control, and it will have a chemical composition. The other point with organics is that if you fall under the USDA certified organic, there's a list of chemical compounds that you can use.
Oh, but they're natural.
Yes, and that's where a lot of people like to make the distinction. But some of those same chemical compositions that the organic farmer is using, some of our conventional farmers are using, and vice versa.
Mhm.
So I like to emphasize both methods are wonderful. I celebrate it all. A lot of times I'm purchasing organic just because that may be the only option that I have available. My price point might be a little bit higher, but at its core, we have to remember it's simply a method of farming.
Mhm.
Nutritionally, organic isn't any better than conventional. Conventional isn't any better than organics when it comes to nutrition.
Mhm.
There's a distinction between the two in that, but they're both highly nutritional in the application of the growing of that crop.
Okay, and the other thing that made me think about when you talked about nutritionally, um, I have always heard too, you need to have a variety of fruits and vegetables because if by chance there was even a trace of some kind of pesticide or crop protection mechanism on that, when you eat a variety of fruits and vegetables, which you need for your health, you also minimize any exposure, let's say from strawberries from Mexico or something that may not have been
Adhered to the same standards as the
exactly.
American farmers. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and you've talked a little bit about organic. Are there other technologies or other things on the horizon in terms of crop protection? You
Well,
mentioned lavender.
Yeah. And again, that's mostly in the use with our smaller organic farmers, with our large farmers. It just doesn't pencil out when they're putting together their budgets based on what they're going to grow.
Mhm.
I call it the crop portfolio, what they're going to be growing. And then obviously what they're going to contract with the shippers who are seeking,
Mhm.
okay, I want you to grow XYZ of romaine lettuce, or I want you to grow XYZ of spinach. So um, that particular method for trying to keep the bugs away from the
Mhm.
crops is mostly in use for our smaller farmers.
Okay.
But the value proposition, whether you're a large farmer, a medium size or small farmer, is the fact that there are tools in the toolbox. And that's what makes it important for us to recognize. And these farmers, most of them are generational. They've made application of some of the new tools that are available to them.
Mhm.
And, you know, a farmer's not going to dump thousands of pounds of chemicals. Number one, it's not healthy or safe for anyone. And the other thing that it just wouldn't be practical. It wouldn't be practical financially. The farmers that grow all the amazing and wonderful and healthy produce in Yuma, they're
Mhm.
feeding those crops to their own family.
Right.
So we got to keep those things in mind.
They're community members.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so it's important for them that they want to maximize on the safety. And today's measurement tools for testing if there's any pesticide residues are in parts per billion, not parts per thousand, not parts per million, but parts per billion.
Wow.
So their instrumentation can
Mhm.
capture if there might be a part per billion residue.
Mhm.
But it's like taking a dropper and dropping one dose of that pesticide in an Olympic-sized pool. The impact on you and I is not going to even exist.
Mhm.
You would have to, if you had the capacity to do that, and you and I know we don't have the capacity to do that, you would have to consume in a short period of time semi-truckloads of, for example, romaine lettuce
Mhm.
to maybe get to that tolerance level. And that's the other thing that the EPA, USDA, FDA set for us is these tolerance levels. And most of those tolerance levels are, you know, they're set so judiciously that the impact on you and I just is basically non-existent. So it's not unusual when they test these harvested crops,
Mhm.
when they test them, they can't find any traces of pesticide because they've been so judicious. And again, remember, for the farmers, this is all regulated. So if something's tested, they can't afford to financially, nor can they afford to because of the restrictions and the judicious guidance that is set and cleared for them. They have to adhere to the label of that application of that crop protection tool. If they don't, they'll get in trouble. And here's another thing that most people don't realize. If I, as a farmer, am going to apply my own crop protection,
Mhm.
I have to be certified in application, and I have to renew that certification every year. I have to
Every
do,
year.
yeah, every year for these continuing education units. So whether I apply my own crop protections, which most farmers don't, they like to lean on those companies that have the expertise in this because they're
Mhm.
probably leaning on a crop protection advisor
Mhm.
to go into their field to assess, are they having an infestation of a particular pest? If they're having an infestation, then the alarm bills have to go off, and they have to have some kind of crop protection application
Okay.
that's taken. And again, that's whether it's organic or conventional.
Mhm.
These crop advisors know the protocols, whether they're going into an organic field. They know the protocol requirements if they're going into a conventional field. And then if the signal is made that says, yes, you need some application of a crop protection tool, then they're going to have to adhere to the application label, like, very judiciously. And then if there is a waiting period for reentry into the field, then again, that's something that they'd have to adhere to. The other thing that our crop protection advisors do is they file all these reports. I think they're called Form 1080 forms. They have to
Mhm.
be filed with the Arizona Department of Agriculture. Well, you and I can reach out to the Arizona Department of Agriculture and say, hey, I want to see what application of what crop protection tools have been used for farms in Yuma, and you actually have access to that. So nothing is being hidden. Everything is being recorded. I just recall recently, just because we have to stay abreast of this stuff at Arizona Farm Bureau all the time, talking to John Bolts, our president for the Arizona Farm Bureau. And again, that's who you met when we talked about the thin green
Right,
line.
right.
And he said, Julie, if somebody, whether it's a worker or a pest control advisor or just some random person off the street, asks what kind of crop protection tools that I've used in my fields, I can pull my notebook off the shelf because everything I do is documented. And that's one of the requirements.
And
So,
that's good.
yeah,
It's really good.
right. So, everything can be traced. Everything can be, all the protocols can be measured, all the food safety rules that they adhere to. In fact, if you go into any of our farms today and their offices, you'll see walls full of notebooks, whether that's food safety or some other protocol. Sometimes it's just simply the steps that they take for the planting, the growing of the crop, and the harvesting. There is more paperwork involved in farming than almost any other industry that I've been exposed to, and I've been exposed to several industries. So that whole judicious effort to try to document,
Mhm.
it's not just trying to document, documenting their steps and what they've done in order to protect their crops. It gives me great peace of mind, and I'm just as excited and happy to eat fruits and vegetables, whether they're organic and conventional. I have no fear and no worry as long as I know that food has been produced here in the United States of America. We have a great system. It's an efficient system, and it's a food safety and human safety focused system. And that's what I get excited about when I hear some of the things that farmers are doing today to protect you and I.
Well, and our food supply is so important. I mean, we have the safest food supply in the world here in
Mhm.
the United States, and it's easy to see why when you look at all the different regulations and all the different steps they have
Right.
to go through. Now, whether they're using any kind of crop protection, traditional, organic, or none at all, does it make a difference in the shelf life of the product? Is it the same regardless, or does it help preserve it if you use some kind of
You know, that
crop protection?
crop protection in terms of trying to battle the bugs doesn't affect that at all.
Hmm.
We know with fruits and vegetable, the shelf life is going to be pretty immediate.
Hmm.
Um, so that's really two separate issues, and it doesn't impact shelf life.
Okay.
Yeah, because the biggest thing they're trying to do when they're in the field with their crops is making sure that those things that would destroy the crops, they're preventing. But in terms of shelf life, it's not impacting that at all.
So, and the pesticides or crop protection used helps to ensure a larger yield, which is helping us to feed the world.
Correct, correct. Again,
Important.
if these tools are taken away from us, whether that's for the organic farmer or the conventional farmer,
Hmm.
that's why 2,500 years BC, they were trying to figure this out, and they didn't have the science that you and I have to do. Whether it's organics or conventional, these crop protection methods are used so that we can feed ourselves, the world, and even have carryover. With our grains, we store a lot of times, but all of these efforts are done so that we can feed ourselves in the world.
And it's amazing. It's amazing because I know I recently heard the Secretary of Agriculture say 1.2% of our population is farmers
Mhm.
and they're feeding the world.
Right.
And yet years ago, one farmer would feed 50 people.
Right.
So it's changed tremendously, and all these tools are important for them.
Yeah.
And a consumer or one of our listeners who may be interested in knowing more about, where their food has come from, what's been utilized on their food. You mentioned as a tool, you could go to the Arizona Department of Agriculture and find out what types of crop protection have been used on various crops in Arizona. I imagine that's true in all states.
Yes, I think any of the states' departments of ag can provide that. But if somebody is more curious about crop protection slash pesticides, I know pesticides is a more common term used. I would encourage them to go to our main website, Arizona Farm Bureau's azfb.org. We're also trying to cover that issue a little bit more on fillyourplate.org and just highlighting how valuable these tools are ultimately for them so that they can eat, and certainly for our farmers so that they can grow the crops and have the commitment to protecting those crops, and their farm workers like they have the commitment. Some of our farmers have worked with the same team for 20 and 30 years. They know these people, their colleagues out in the fields by name oftentimes. And they want to do things right, and they want to do things to protect people. So crop protection and human health is number one priority because, again, a John Bolt's who has a large fruits and vegetable operation versus John Doe, Jane Doe that might have a small organic, they love their people, they love their family. They're going to do things that protect their family, number one, but also their people, and then ultimately you and I. One of the visits down in Yuma, and this was one of my conventional farmers, the romaine lettuce just looked so lush and so beautiful, and he went out into the field and he cut me some heads and he said, take them home. You don't even really have to rinse them. You might, in case I cut a little too deep in the soil and you're going to get some soil, but he was so confident in the way he farmed and the crop protection applications that he's made. It was fresh, and then he tossed a couple romaine heads into the back of his truck for his family. So that's how safe and how judicious they are in making sure that they're doing what they have to do and then have it documented so that it can be vetted if it has to be, which it doesn't have to be, but this is that layer of protection. You're more accountable if you're documenting what you do. And historically, as you look over and you review for your food safety practices, because even today, as science gets more and more effective, there's historically, you can look over your records and say, look what we did there and how wonderfully we protected that crop and our farm workers. So even in the documentation, they can make application for improvements and stuff like that.
So you said a couple things I did want to emphasize again, that consumers and our listeners who are interested in knowing more about where their food comes from and applications that have been applied to their food can go to the Department of Agriculture in their state or to the Farm Bureau,
Right.
and have tools there to evaluate, the different foods they're eating and just
Right.
know more about them and know where their food comes from,
Right.
which I think is important. And you alluded to one other thing that I think is important too, is that most of our farmers are family farms. It's a family farm, it's a family, they're part of the community, and they want to make sure that food is safe for themselves, their family, and all of their neighbors in the community.
Right.
So these aren't big manufacturing facilities for the most part. They are family farms, and they care about their products. And that's true with dairy, that's true with beef.
Right.
They all have regulations that they comply with, but they really do care about what they're doing and want to make sure they provide the best product for consumers.
We do have large family farms, but they're still family farms. I think on the national level, the Census of Ag cites something like 97% of our farms and ranches here in America are family farmed.
Yeah.
And then in the state, we're a little bit lower. It's 95% of our farms and ranches are family owned. And again, if it's their priority to take care of their family, to feed their family what they grow, that priority is going to be sent to us. And then you have that amazing layer of regulation by the USDA, the EPA, and the FDA. Again, it's too much to risk if we don't do this right. And the neat thing is we're doing this right.
That's
It's just too much to risk if we didn't do it right.
and that's very comforting.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you know what our last question always is on this
Yes.
podcast.
Yeah.
Takeaways for those that are listening. What would you say 2 or 3 of the main things are that you want them to remember?
So for me, just be at peace that your food is being raised with great efficacy and safety. I have no worries in my heart or mind whether I'm purchasing organic or conventional. So I'm just wanting to emphasize with our listeners that our food system in America is an effective and safe food system. Second, know that there are, for lack of a better term, protocols in place that layer on the the food safety elements that we have. And then I would just say, if you're curious and you want to learn more, go to Arizona Farm Bureau's website and literally in the search bar, just put in crop protection or pesticides. We did a very in-depth, several years ago, heavy-duty in-depth story on pesticide/crop protection use and how it's vetted. And we're going to continue to share these stories because, again, we're very transparent in agriculture. We don't see farms right off well, in a few places we do, but you typically don't see farms right off the freeway, so you can't necessarily just hop out. So we know it's our role to share these stories. So if you want to learn more, understand more, go to azfb.org or fillyourplate.org, where we're covering these stories. We're explaining how crop protection is applied and how safe and effective it is, not only for ensuring that we have yields that will feed us all, but the safety level for their families first, and then where they sell their crops. It's a beautiful thing, is all I can say. It's just truly a beautiful thing.
I agree. And knowledge is power.
Yes,
The
knowledge
more
is
you
power.
know, and the more you go to legitimate websites
Right.
and legitimate,
And
science-backed
Yep.
sites with social media websites, other means of communication, the more knowledge you gain and the better you feel about our food supply.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you. You are always a wealth of knowledge. I really appreciate you letting me interview you today, and I've learned a lot and really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you, Tammy.